A couple years back, I was the victim of a crazy stalker. I was in college then, 20 years old. For context, I lived with 2 friends in a rented house, all of us guys. This was the time in our lives when we were trying to be independent, find our place in the world, and trying all sorts of new things to discover ourselves. From parties to constantly expanding our social network, it was an exhilarating time in my life. Maybe that's why I didn't pick up on the warning signs spelling future trouble. It all began quite innocuously with random sweet messages from an unknown number. They ranged from saying things like, "Have a nice day," or were outright positive quotes stolen from Instagram or Pinterest. No matter how many times I asked who this was, I never received an answer, but then the messages were fairly innocent, so I thought nothing of them. One day in class, I was a tad drunk and quite sleepy when I received a text from that same unknown number. "Dress shirts look amazing on you." I was instantaneously sober and alert, discreetly looking around the classroom in hopes of spotting this person. I was wearing a dress shirt that day, something I didn't really do that often. Suddenly, the texts weren't so innocent anymore. "Who is this?" I texted back when I didn't spot anyone suspicious in the class. "Your secret admirer," they texted back with a winky face emoji. I put my phone on silent with a frown, a bit creeped out but also intrigued. This became a daily occurrence. The person would always make personal comments now, critiquing my hairstyle, my clothes, and sometimes random things. They even praised the nerves on the back of my hands, being so weird that I blocked their number. That proved to be a mistake, and I soon began getting messages from a different unknown number demanding why I blocked them, why I was being so selfish. I got a series of unhinged messages telling me that I was ungrateful to push away such pure love. By now, I was convinced that perhaps one of my housemates were pulling a dumb prank on me, because surely no one talked like this. It wasn't some cheesy movie, for goodness sake. I quizzed my housemates, gauging their reactions in case they were lying, but they genuinely seemed amused to learn that I had a weird secret admirer. They egged me on to sweet-talk this mystery person in hopes that it might turn out to be a hot girl, but I wisely did the opposite and ignored the messages. As I said before, I met so many people daily, even in passing, that it was impossible to pinpoint anyone specific. It's why I genuinely freaked out when one afternoon I got a message praising my cologne. I looked around myself in paranoia, recounting who was able to get close enough to me to smell my perfume, but I had no answer. "Stop it, this isn't cute or funny." I texted back, but only got a kiss emoji in return. I blocked this number too, tempted to change my own number if it came down to it, but a new issue arose. I began to get DMs on my socials and even daily emails. The person gloated that I was silly for playing hard to get. To them it was a game, but to me it was quickly becoming a nuisance. This person, this stalker, always used dummy accounts, so it was pretty useless to report them or try to figure out who they really were. Slowly, the messages evolved to really personal questions I would never answer. At my radio silence, the person would lash out and then play the victim, trying to guilt-trip me into replying. All I ever told them was that I had no interest in them and that I wished they would get help. It came to a boiling point when one day, after some time hanging out with friends, I came back to my housemates giving me funny smirks. When I asked them what was their deal, they began teasing me about being Mr. Sneaky for hiding my girlfriend. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, not quite up for serious dating. Their jokes died down once they realized that they essentially let some unknown girl in my room behind my back. From what I learned from them, she was one of those cute manic pixie girl types, super sweet on the surface. She made the excuse of being my girlfriend, shyly saying that she needed some things I accidentally took of hers after our date. The creepy thing were the details she shared about this date. My housemates believed it because it did sound precisely the kind of date I would go on. This girl seemed to know me almost as well as I knew myself, yet I had no idea who she was. Of course, no one took any pictures of her, and what would I even tell the police? Nothing was stolen. After some brainstorming and asking around for a girl of her description, we learned that I did actually meet her at some chance party, an event that meant nothing to me, but that started her whole obsession with me. Throughout college, I kept getting those messages and I always felt watched. I took precautions to never engage with this girl even when she insisted to meet me, confident that we'll get married right after college. I blocked her as much as I could and was extra careful of never sharing anything too personal online, a habit that benefited me in general. I shifted to another city after college and was surprised at the lack of intrusive messages. From one of my old housemates, I learned just last year that this girl got obsessed with someone else at her job, getting arrested for breaking into her new victim's home. She may be in jail, but I can't help but remain cagey with everyone else I encounter now. This is by far the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. After breaking up with my abusive boyfriend, I moved back to my parents' house. I was in a very bad place emotionally and just needed some downtime to heal from all the manipulative, vile behavior I had been subjected to for 2 whole years. I won't use any real names, so I'll call my ex-boyfriend Randall from here on. Randall was a textbook narcissist. He was selfish, would do anything possible to get his way, and was so good at manipulating that he didn't need physical force to keep his control on me. He was also obsessive, refusing to accept that he and I were done. He would bombard me with texts, call me incessantly at times, and leave me a dozen voice messages. He would also switch around his tone, but no matter how much he yelled, sweet-talked, or cajoled me to move back in with him, I refused. I changed my number and decided to lay low on my socials to distance myself from him digitally as well. All this was happening in winter, the gloominess of the weather only making my mental state worse. It was only due to my supportive parents and some old friends that I was able to keep going. I even got a job at the local coffee shop, so I wasn't moping in my old room all the time. I liked my rather cozy job since my parents lived in a small town where things were a lot more laid back when compared to the rush of the big city I had become used to. However, one evening after my shift, I found a little note tucked under the windshield wiper. It only had a big heart drawn on it with some cheap red ballpoint pen. I didn't know how to even react to it, so I threw the note away and put it out of my mind. But this became a routine. I asked my colleagues if they were trying to prank me, but even they found the notes immature and in bad taste. No matter how much we collectively tried to keep an eye out for this Romeo, we couldn't spot them, yet there was always a red ballpoint heart waiting for me at the end of my shift. Changing shifts also didn't help, as if this lovesick stalker was constantly keeping track of me like clockwork. In my volatile mental state, one evening, I angrily scribbled "Go to hell" on the back of the note I found that day and placed it down in the parking lot before leaving. I was more than happy when the note stopped, but after around a week, I was appalled to find awful things scratched into my car with a sharp key. No one knew who did it, and there was no CC key for me to turn to. I reported it to the local sheriff, but what could he possibly do about it without any further clues? I didn't resign from my job in some act of defiance. My dad took on the duty of dropping and picking me up from work, assuring me that if it came down to it, he would sit outside and wait too. I didn't waste his time, but it was nice to know that I wasn't alone in this. The coffee shop had a glass front with the view of the busy main street. The working counter was directly opposite to the entrance, so I pretty much always had the main street in my view, the employee parking space located to the side of the building. One evening, I could scarcely believe when I spotted a very familiar man lurking just out of sight on the main street. Randall. That explained the notes, the abuse scratched upon my car. Being as controlling and abusive as he was, Randall made a point to know everything about me when we were dating. It's embarrassing, but I mistook this interest as a sign of deep love that time, not ammo to be used against me later. As soon as Randall appeared on the main street, he was gone, showing me that he knew where I was and that I was not getting away so easily. I quit my job after this, paranoid to go out. My parents were in outrage. They promised to help me get a restraining order against my ex, but of course it wasn't so easy. It wasn't a crime to visit our town, and there was no way to prove that the heart notes were the work of my ex. Frustrated, I soon began staying cooped up in my room. The snow outside further encouraged me to stay within the safety of my home. That was just another illusion because, of course, Randall knew where my parents' house was. I even brought him to proudly show him off to my parents. It was highly concerning when my mom found a man's footprints around our home and that same heart note left on our porch. We were already trying to get a restraining order, using this as further evidence, but then our neighbors across the street became our silver lining. They had a CCTV facing the street and clearly caught Randall lurking near our home. It chilled me to see that he wasn't just trying to break in our home, but he seemed armed too. This was finally enough to get my ex arrested and for my appeal for a restraining order to get approved. I later learned from a friend whose older brother was a cop in town that they found Randall staying at a motel a bit away from our town. They also found rope, a syringe of cheap anesthetic and actual weapons stashed in his car. I've heard that some stalkers never change, and the law only ever steps in once it's too late. I had to shift to a whole another state, start anew, and still hope to never see my ex from hell ever again. When I was 17, I worked at a movie store located at my town's strip mall. Of course, I ran into all sorts of people every single day and had many minor let's not meet type situations happen to me. Being a girl certainly didn't help, but the story I'm about to share definitely tops all of the weirdness I've ever been subjected to. There was a lanky tall man I had never seen before who came by the store while I was working the cash register. He seemed lost honestly, looking around in a daze. Wearing a ratty coat, his clothes seemed like they had seldom been washed, a musky smell wafting off him. I noticed my two colleagues ignoring him as he shuffled over to the counter. He just kept staring at me a little too intensely. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked politely. A good half a minute went by in silence before he mumbled some new action movie's name. Even the few customers who were browsing in the store looked at the man oddly. "We don't have it yet, sir," the boy stocking the shelf calmly said while the man's eyes remained glued to me. He nodded with this sudden big smile and then left. I think we all relaxed once he was out the door. Encountering a weirdo wasn't anything new, so I didn't think too much of it, but this man was back at the store again in 2 days. This time, he picked a romance movie and beamed at me as I gave him his change. "Have you seen it?" the man asked me in a low voice. I shook my head no. "It's really good. The hero is very determined, and the heroine is so beautiful." He showed me the cover, then laughed quietly. "Looks kind of like you, eh?" I only gave him an impersonal smile, so with a creepy chuckle he left. He was back again the next day, renting another romance movie. I noticed that on the cover the actress again had long brunette hair, but otherwise we had no similarities. Yet the man claimed otherwise again, leaving with that chuckle of his. This became a common occurrence until one day, the man quietly asked me for more adult movies. I felt my face grow hot, while he asked for very specific types of such films. I told him we didn't have anything like that, so he rented another romance movie. He began to always ask me if we had very specific movies, and if I knew what this or that even meant. "Sir, I'm 17. I told him one day, annoyed with this creep. He grinned hearing this, like I had said something charming, and then left. That day, I told my parents about this man, but even they had never seen such a person in our small town. Our town is one of those tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone. My grandparents built the house we lived in, so we were anything but new. Dad assured me that he would ask around, see what the deal was. Then, I spotted the man outside my high school. He was in a rundown Honda Civic, parked in a tactful spot that used the bushes to hide the license plate for most passersby. As if he sensed me, the man looked at me, grinned, and was gone by the time I got an adult to confront him. My parents were outraged at the audacity, contacting the local cops as soon as I told them. I didn't have any evidence or the man's license plate, so I could only describe the man, mentioning his inappropriate questions at the movie store as well. I didn't have it in me to go to work again, so I quit my job. My colleagues from there further adding to the man's description to help the police. Mom bought me pepper spray that I always kept close whenever I went out anywhere, although I made sure that I was never alone. We began to find love notes in our mail, the writing a manic scrawl. I also started to spot this man around just enough to know that he was following me, but he was too quick to be caught. Clearly, he was not new to this. It got to a point where I was so paranoid that I began to sleep with my pepper spray tucked under my pillow. I would double-check my bedroom's door and window, scared that my stalker knew where I lived already. One quiet afternoon, on a very hot summer day, so no one was outdoors, my dad was fixing up a curtain railing. He wanted more nails and told me to grab some from the shed in the backyard, so I headed out. In the daytime, one hardly expects anything bad to happen, but the man came running at me from behind the big mango tree we had in our backyard, gripping my arm hard enough to leave marks. I haven't been the same ever since that day in my parents' backyard. He clutched my face before I could scream, trying to knock me out. In the struggle, I managed to pull out the pepper spray I had in my shorts pocket and went all out with it. The man cried out, swore at me, and stumbled back. I took this chance to scream at the top of my lungs, summoning my panicked parents, as well as neighbors. The rest feels like a blur, honestly. We found out that the man had parked his car a block away from our home and planned to kidnap me that day. The reason no one knew where he lived was because he lived in his car. This man was already on the run, having assaulted some poor soul in another town, so he was arrested and given a long enough sentence that I could live my life worry-free for the most part. But events like these, they leave such a strong impact on a person, and I feel like I